Hi everybody, I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama, and I am going to talk to you today about worms. Now, do we really have to talk about this? Can we just skip the conversation? No. As far as having chickens or quail or guineas or any kind of backyard fowl, you are eventually going to have the conversation about what to do in case your birds get any kind of parasite. And so I'm here because we are finally having to deal with deworming. And since I have a lot of information to give you and show you some medications and some other options, I thought I would just do this video inside. So it's time for us to have our little meeting about worms. So first of all, the way I do things is I go and do a ton of research. I talk to people locally. I've read articles from people in Australia, from all over the world, and I get all of this information and I figure out what works best for me, and then I like to come and tell you guys everything that I've learned so that you can pick and choose what works for your birds. The other thing that I'll say before we go any farther is I'm not a veterinarian. I never have been a veterinarian and I never will be. So please, I hope you're not taking medical advice for your pets off of just one random person on YouTube. And I mean, I know you're probably thinking like she's talented and she's funny and she's intelligent and I should just do everything she says. But please, please, please do your own research, contact your vet. There are chicken friendly vets all over the world. You can find them and ask them questions before you decide to do anything for sure. All right, so talking about worms. First of all, there are things that you can do to be preventative, as well as things that you can do once you actually know that your chickens have some type of parasite. For us, we did a pretty conservative route as far as not doing vaccinations, not doing anything crazy, to be preventative, because for our family, if you haven't watched my other content, we have 5 chickens. They are not meat birds. They're basically pets that happen to lay eggs for us every once in a while. And so we chose to be really conservative when it came to the financial aspect. So we did not do anything as far as vaccines or topical medication to be preventative. So a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about, that I'm going to teach you, things that you can do, are things that you can do before you think your chickens or your guineas or your quail or your turkeys or your ducks or any of your outside birds, things you can do before you think you have a parasite problem. Some of the other stuff you can do is preventative, or it's also once you actually know you have like an outbreak. The other thing is, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about serve either external or internal parasites. And once we get to the actual medication, that actually takes care of both. What you're usually going to be dealing with, and I'll say chickens, but for the rest of the video, you know I mean any kind of outside bird that's your pet that you have as a flock. The external will usually be either mites or poultry lice, which cannot affect mammals like humans or your pet dog, but they do basically the same thing. Internal parasites, you're usually dealing with roundworms, but there can also be tapeworms and other kinds of wormy things living inside your bird. Of course, you want to think about if your birds are meat birds, you know, what you're doing and if that's safe for you to consume the meat. The same thing if you're eating their eggs, any other animals that you have around, because some of the methods that I'm talking about, for example, work for birds, but they can be dangerous, like if your dog drinks the same water. So for example, the most basic things that you can do that it's not really any risk, it's not going out and injecting your birds and dealing with vaccines and insanity. It's not really homeopathic stuff, but it's more natural things that you can do. And this can be done preventatively, or it can also be done once you think there might be a problem going on. I would suggest that you, if you're quarantining new birds, if you're bringing in additional birds to your flock, that you watch my other videos about quarantine to try to minimize any spreading of any parasites, anything like that that you can deal with. The other times that you would want to really be just very cognizant of like, hey, there might be worms or I might be starting to deal with problems is when there's weather changes. When it finally gets like here in South Texas, where it goes from, okay, now we're not in summer anymore, we're not going to have any more 100-degree days, now it's definitely getting cooler, or during hurricane season, or when it starts to get warmer in the spring. So those big season changes where you just feel like that permanent shift of weather, not where it's still going back and forth, but we're like, okay, we're definitely in this season, that'll be the other time that you just need to be aware of, okay, I might want to be a bit more vigilant on what I'm doing. So to go into the easy things, and these are things that I pretty much suggest you should do anyway. Just again, to be preventative, there's multiple benefits. The first is your birds need a dust bath. And a dust bath is the equivalent of your cat preening themselves and licking themselves. Chickens and other birds, they don't really bathe as well in the water as they do just in the dirt. And I've got videos on how to make a dust bath. You can look it up. And a lot of this stuff, there's different opinions. But it can be coarse sand, not like sandbox sand, but coarse, like the grittier stuff. It can just be dirt. You don't want to put any kind of dirt or soil that's got fertilizer or anything in it. And then you can also sprinkle DE, which is diatomaceous earth. I have a video that I just did recently about DE and the benefits of that. All of this stuff is very little to no risk. It's little to no cost. It's little to no effort. So we've got dust bath. We've got using DE throughout, and it can be anywhere that your chickens like to hang out. You can also do apple cider vinegar. You want raw apple cider vinegar, like Bragg's is a brand that has the mother in it. It basically just means that it's ACV that is unfiltered. You can add 1 tablespoon of that per gallon of water, and that's another thing you can just do all the time, all year round if you want to. A huge bottle of Bragg's that's probably at least 16 or 18 ounces, I'm sure it's more than that, will last you, if you're using a couple of tablespoons at a time, that'll last you months and months, and the bottle is like $6. So far, again, we've got dust bath, DE, apple cider vinegar. Now, things that you can give that will particularly help with internal parasites. You know, your chickens ingest something and it helps anything that's inside their body. Raw garlic is really, really great. You can give it to them to eat, or you can also put it in their water. Now, if you put it in their water, this is one of those things where you want to make sure no other animals can get to it, because from what I've read, like if you have outside dogs or like guard dogs, you don't want your dogs to be able to drink water that's got raw garlic in it. The other thing is with the raw garlic water, you have to change the water out more often. So I just give it to my chickens. You know, you just peel the cloves and you just chop it up so it's in, I mean, it can be pea-sized. It can be pretty decent sizes. It doesn't have to be minced really fine. But raw garlic is great. Spices like red pepper flakes, like the stuff you put on your pizza if you're weird like my husband. Red pepper flakes or cayenne pepper, or chili powder, any of those 3, cayenne powder, chili powder, or red pepper flakes, you can put on your chicken's food. You can put it around like where they forage and where they peck and stuff. Or what I like to do, if you want to put the garlic and those spices together, is just cook them some plain oatmeal. It can't have any seasonings or any like flavor in it, just oatmeal with water, like plain oats with water, and put the raw garlic and the spicy stuff in it and let your birds eat that. And that's knocking out a lot of those internal parasites. The other thing that's really good for them to ingest, and remember, you don't want their treats to be more than like max like 15% of their diet. So you can't be giving a ton of stuff every day. So make sure that you're just balancing out how often you give them this stuff. But especially this time of year, it's November here right now in South Texas, and any kind of raw squash, or including raw pumpkin, particularly the seeds, and the name of the chemical escapes me, that's like a really great dewormer. So letting your chickens ingest, like literally just break open a pumpkin or a squash, let them eat the seeds inside, let them eat the guts, let them eat everything inside, and then just dispose of it once it starts to get moldy. Remember, we never want to give our chickens anything that's got mold on it or anything like that. So those are all things that you can just do on a regular basis to help prevent worms, to help if your chickens may have a little bit of worminess that you don't even really notice any symptoms or any signs, and I'll get to that in a second. But those are things that you can be doing on a regular basis anyway, especially as it starts to get cold. I like to do the oatmeal for them, not every morning, but probably every other morning. You can buy minced garlic already, or you can chop up garlic. Like, none of that is expensive and none of that is a lot of effort. So real quick, before we get into the medication that I used and telling you my experience with that, because that was fun last night when I dewormed my chickens. As far as external parasites, what would you see? If you have mites or poultry lice, they're really, really tiny. They work the same way that lice would work on us, like the normal head louse. In that they're going to be on chickens or on birds, they'll be right at the base of the pin feathers, and they're just there getting all the nutrients and all of the moisture and just like sucking the goodness out right at the base of the pin feather. So just like lice on you would be right against the scalp, they would be down against the skin. if chickens have a fairly bad infestation, not only will you see the lice crawling around like where they lay down at night or around their roosts in the nesting boxes, things like that, but you can look for things like your chicken being pale on their comb or on their wattles. They're pale because, I mean, their blood is getting sucked out. And you'll notice them being lethargic, the way they're preening themselves. So all of these things, usually if you see external signs in your chicken, like if you can tell something's wrong, they've probably got a pretty bad infestation. For internal parasites, this is trickier, like for roundworms. Usually the way you find out if you're not doing anything preventative is by finding them in your chicken's poop. And the problem is if you find it in your chicken's poop, it means your chickens probably have a lot of worms. It's almost like the poop is the overflow. So it's like your chicken's body is holding like the max amount of worms that they can, and the poop is like taking the extra ones. So if you see them in the poop, like what's happened with me or my chicken, right? Then that means that there's probably a lot. So it's not just like, oh, they've probably got one or two. It's like, okay, we need to definitely do something. Now, before I get into the medication, I wanted to tell you something that's a little bit endearing and a little bit funny, but I think it's so important, and I've talked about it in some of my other videos. When I first got chickens, me being super type A and like very regimented, and I want a routine and I want to know everything, I was getting on the local forum. And if you're not a member of a local chicken forum, look for one on Facebook or just on the internet, because it has been amazing. It's people who are in the same area as you, so they're dealing with the same weather, the same climate, the same types of predators, the same types of bugs and diseases and everything. And you'll find so many people that are smarter than you. Like in my case, that hasn't been very difficult, but I know I have this sacred little group, and I can go and ask questions and they won't make fun of me, and they know I'm not crazy, and they're just here to help because we all love our birds. So anyway, I asked them when I first got chickens, what do I need to have in my chicken medical kit and my chicken first aid kit? Like before I even have any problems, what stuff do you guys suggest I buy? And some people said, well, you can get this medication, and if you want to vaccinate, you can do this, and have Neosporin without pain relief, and like, a couple of other random things like waterproof bandages, stuff like that. But the main thing that they said, and it was fantastic, they're like, the most important thing is for you to have is just an old bucket. And I was kind of like, what? And for the old bucket, they want you to just take it, turn it upside down, and just go out and sit and be with your chickens, because that's the most important thing you can do, is just know your animals. So before I get into the medication, I wanted to tell you, please, please, please keep a chicken journal or a chicken notebook or a chicken little notepad or a note on your phone, something to where you just know your birds. And that can be something like, this is some of the things that I have written down in my stuff. And I'm super type A, so you may not need to be this detailed, but it's just for maintenance. It's in case anybody has to come and chicken sit for you when you go out of town. It's if anything goes wrong and you're talking to a vet, or you're just trying to figure out like what's happening, what's wrong with one of your birds. So if you can write down their approximate birthday or their hatch day, where they were hatched, where you got them, how old they were when you got them, and then particularly for your hens, when they started laying, about what time of day they lay, what color their egg is, just basic information like that. So please, 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 please keep a journal. And that includes, how often do you go out and do the DE? How often do you go out and spread the diatomaceous earth? Did you try a new brand of food? Write all that stuff down that could later maybe be a clue or something for you to analyze to figure out what's maybe going wrong. So I try to go out and watch all of my chickens every morning. Of course, this time of year we're dealing with, kindergarten drop off in the morning. So sometimes I go out and I open the gate for my birds in the morning, and I clean their poop, and I make sure everybody's alive and they're kind of walking around and stuff, and that's it. And I'm out there like 5 minutes. But what I try to do on a regular basis is let everybody come out of the coop, and while I'm doing my chores and cleaning everything out, I'm watching the birds out in the yard. And I want to make sure everybody's doing chicken stuff. And if I don't have time to look at them in the morning, I go out in the afternoon and just sit with them. It doesn't take that long. But you just kind of do a little roll call, and you say, okay, so-and-so is acting like a chicken. I saw so-and-so eat. I saw so-and-so poop. And you're just checking on these things. And I try to watch who poops where, and it's like, okay, Flopsy just pooped right there. So then after she moves away, I walk over and I look at it. And that's how I found out that she had worms, because there was a dead roundworm in her poop, which means the worm lived its entire life cycle in her body, and it's out, and it's probably overflow. So if one of your birds has worms, and there's a really good chance they all do. Now I got her pretty recently, so there's a chance that she had worms before I got her. That's what I'm thinking, and maybe my other birds haven't been affected, but at this point it's kind of like you need to treat everybody. So I did a ton of research, and I found the medication Ivermectin, and I went and got it. I got a different brand of the same product because now it's not like a copyrighted or, branded thing. You can get different brands. So I actually got a brand called Ivermax. Ivermectin. Here's what I've learned before I actually show you and tell you what my experience was. Ivermectin is a medication that has been approved by the FDA for use on larger mammals. We're talking cows, horses, sheep, goats, things like that. The way it works, and it claims that it's good for external and internal parasites. So remember, we're talking mites and lice on the outside, and worms, particularly roundworms, on the inside. The way it works is it goes through the bloodstream and it just directly attacks those parasites and kills them. For ivermectin, there's two different kinds. There's an injectable, so like a vaccine, or there's a topical, which is called pour on, and that is put basically as close to the skin as you can get. So in the case of chickens, you want to get it where they're not going to be able to reach it and way under all of their feathers right to the skin, because it's got to be absorbed. Now the problem with ivermectin, and again, and Ivermax and all of the other brands that are basically the same medication, the problem is that, kind of like for pregnant women, how nobody really wants to test drugs on the pregnant women, no one wants to be the guinea pig with their baby, right? Nobody wants to test it on chickens and then try eating the meat or eating the eggs or things like that. So the problem is that even a lot of vets will not specifically tell you to use ivermectin, because it was originally created for those larger mammals, like 300, 400 pound mammals, like cows. So that's where the delay came for me, as far as figuring out, okay, well, this is the medication that everybody uses, but there wasn't really any black and white, like ivermectin says you use this many drops on your chicken or anything like that. Nobody wants to do that because nobody wants the liability. So that's, like I said, where there's been a lot of discrepancy, and where it took a while for me to read different websites and different sources and talk to people, to where I finally found, okay, this looks like the median and this looks like the number that would be effective but not be damaging. Because the problem is, and we'll talk about all the other discrepancies in a second, one of the problems, I guess, is that you're dealing with a medication that has to be given strongly enough that it's effective, right? Because if you give too little, then either the parasites will become resistant, and then you end up with another outbreak that's worse, and you don't fix the problem in the first place. Or if you do something that's too strong, your chicken's body can't recover, and it's going to kill your bird too. So it's like... And then again, if you're dealing with meat birds, if you slaughter your chickens for meat, then you have to be thinking about human consumption. If you eat your chicken's eggs, which everybody does, right, then you're having to deal with that. So lots of discrepancies. What I can tell you is that it looks like, and I'll show you the medication, it looks like for a normal full-grown bird, so not like a huge big meat bird like a leghorn, and not a tiny little bird like a bantam, but just for a regular full-grown chicken, between 7 to 10 drops is good. And I did the pour on because I didn't want to deal with vaccines and injectables and things like that. So I wanted to do the pour on, which is the topical. So for the rest of this, I'll be talking about that. So this is the way that it came, and this is Ivermax. And I know the bottle looks really weird, but once I actually checked it out, I was like, oh, that's really smart. So, and it's got an expiration date on it. This whole thing was $20. And it came in a box just like this. There's not really any instructions or anything like that, because the theory is that, it's recommended by a vet. But what's cool is you can tilt the bottle and you can read your measurement right here. And then this second one is where you would put in the syringe, or where you put in, your dropper or whatever it is that you've got. So Tractor Supply here in Texas, again, I don't know how much prices change depending on where you are in the country or in the world, but this whole thing, it's 8.5 ounces, so it's 250 milliliters. This was $20. This was 50 cents. So we're dealing with about $20 to deal with this. Now, the bad news is, you have to buy this huge thing when you only need like 10 drops per chicken. But just to be aware, first of all, you have to dose twice. So you have to dose, this will kill live worms and live parasites and live mites and lice on your birds. It does not do anything for the eggs. So all of the different ivermectin variations, you can see I got Ivermax, but all the different variations, they say you have to do one dose, whatever day or time you do it, do the exact same thing 1 week later for everybody. And that makes sure that every stage in the life cycle, you knocked out all of those parasites, all of those worms, lice, whatever. But even still, 50 drops times 2, I have a ton of this stuff. So the problem is if you're buying it for chickens, because this was dosed for cows, right, for cattle and goats and stuff, you're going to end up buying a large amount. But the good news is I've got it for another year. So in the spring, I can do everybody again. And then I don't know what I'll do with it. So you can buy the actual ivermectin. They had the injectable at Tractor Supply. A bottle that was about 6 ounces was $60. And so for me, like I always do, and I may get some heat for this, but we have to do the balance in our family of, it's almost Christmas. We're 4 people living on 1 teacher salary in Texas. So, I mean, that sounds like a punchline right there. So I don't want to do nothing for my birds, but I can't go out and drop $60 on this huge bottle of medication where I'm only using a tiny bit. So for me, this was the happy medium to where I feel like I'm doing the responsible thing. I am medicating my birds. I am giving them something to help them. But it was $20. It was freelancing money. We can deal with that and we're okay. So the other things that I wanted to tell you before I tell you my experience is another one of the things that is not really consistent is how long do you have to have a withdrawal period? And a withdrawal period when you're talking about chickens is basically how long do you have to throw away their eggs? How long do you have to not slaughter them or whatever before their body is basically detoxed to that medication and it's safe for you? And some people said you don't have to do anything if you're using ivermectin. You can just eat the eggs anyway. It's no big deal. I mean, it'll just deworm you, right? And other people said, no, you need to not use anything for a week after your second dose. So I did this on a Tuesday night. So I've got all this week, theoretically, I'd have to throw out the eggs, and then all through until I have not given them anything for a week, if that makes sense. So this Tuesday I did a dose. I have to do the follow-up dose next Tuesday, and then their withdrawal period would be until the Tuesday after that, if that makes sense. So 2 weeks of no eggs. Now I'm still going to collect them. I honestly am undecided on if I'm going to eat the eggs or not. If anyone's going to eat them, it's just going to be me. So the eggs that I started collecting this morning, I went ahead and I'm just marking the shell a little bit. And either I will eat them or I may cook them and give them back to the chickens. I may just end up throwing them out. I don't know. I'm just really cheap and I hate being wasteful. So I haven't decided yet what to do. I'm going to ask some more local people and see what they think. But that's another thing you need to be aware of. All right. So how do you do this? Okay, so we talked about watching your birds, being aware of your birds, just knowing your birds. Another thing that helps is anytime you want to do your little medical once-over exam, whether you're checking them for mites and lice, you're checking their feet, you're checking their butts. I mean, whatever you need to do, it's best to do it when they're up in bed. And like I found out last night, it's even better not to do it like right when you go and lock them up, like they've just gone up to bed and they're still kind of awake and they're settling down. But wait until they've been up there for at least an hour and they're actually asleep. Because then it's a lot easier for you to go from bird to bird without everybody waking up and freaking out and doing anything like that. The problem, especially in my coop, those of you who have seen mine, is it's not a walk-in coop. So I can't go in there and like be in amongst the birds and, medicate each of them and just go down the row. I'm like leaning in over birds and like, sorry, and trying to keep them from coming out because I don't want them going out into the dark yard in the middle of the night. So I have a super cool headlamp that's like really dorky, but it's like the best $10 like I've ever spent on Amazon. Like it's super amazing. And so I click on my little light. And I don't know why I brought these because you know what they look like, but I have latex gloves. You want to glove yourself just in case you end up getting some of this medication on you. It is very watery. It's not like a gel or anything like that. And this is at least the Ivermax. I read, it can get sticky in the syringe, so you want to try to do everybody quick before it starts to dry, but I didn't have any problems with that. It actually smells good. It almost kind of smells like off-brand Kool-Aid or something. I don't know. But what I ended up doing is, tilting the bottle, filling up that zone a little bit, got the syringe full, and I had a little table right outside the coop, so I had my little workstation, kind of like my Bumblefoot station, for those of you who saw that. And I just went and jammed this in, wiggled it in down as far in between the feathers as I could get on the bird, right back in between her shoulder blades. I wanted it up high on her neck because I don't want her trying to preen and like eat it or getting it on her beak or whatever. And I just did 10 little drops, and I went and I was able to do everybody in less than 5 minutes. I was actually not putting it off because it needs to be done. And again, I want to be responsible. I want to take care of my birds, but I was dreading this. Like I'm going to be able to get 1 or 2 done, and then everyone's going to start freaking out and moving around and panicking, and it's just going to be this disaster, and medicine's going to go everywhere. And so I was kind of anticipating like, I'm going to go do this, but I really don't want to. Being a grown-up sucks. But I went out and did it, and it was really easy. It was really easy. But I waited until my birds had been up. I went out and locked them up at like I don't know, 6:30 or 7 because of the time change. And then I waited until probably for at least an hour before I went back out. After I like psyched myself out, I was like, all right, come on, we just got to go do this. We got to go knock it out. And I put on my gloves and I had my little lamp and I got all 5 birds. Again, I only know of one confirmed case who has worms. I've been checking all the other chickens' poop. Everybody else looks good. But it's like, if you're going to medicate one, you need to medicate everybody. And then I also set a reminder on my phone that next Tuesday night, I've got to do the whole thing again, just to make sure we do the cycle of everybody. So I'm keeping all of this in a box. Of course, you want to keep it sealed up in a cool, dark place. So don't leave it out like with your chickens and stuff like that. Like find a place indoors to lock it up and keep it safe. Of course, you don't want kids messing with this. Like that doesn't need to be said. It does smell sweet, which was almost kind of concerning to me. Like, uh-oh, I don't want it to be like, the antifreeze incident with children ingesting that kind of stuff. The only other thing that I'll say that I've learned in this experience, before I shut this off, I'm doing this all by memory, by the way, so yay me. The other thing that I will say is once your chickens have been medicated, like, okay, you just did a dose of ivermectin or whatever for worms or whatever. If your chickens had worms or any other internal parasite, again, this doesn't advertise or claim that it helps with tapeworms, which is like, but roundworms or other just types of, incidental parasites or whatever, it says it does help. If they have been medicated and they did have some, as your medication goes into their bloodstream and kills the parasites, your chickens are going to excrete those worms that have been killed by the ivermectin. So now, I have a dog. Hello, Sadie Mae. So now I'm fully expecting to see worms in poop. And now it's going to be like, oh, you did have worms and I didn't know. Because the only one who showed me worms in her poop that just showed me, hey, I have a really bad infestation, was Flopsy, my new weak Easter egger. Not the strong one, but the weaker of the two. She's the only one who showed me. So, but now it'll be interesting to see who else poops out worms, if that makes sense. Because now it's like, oh, you had them, you didn't have them that badly, but now they're getting killed, basically. So now we're going to see. So I'm going to continue to vigilantly check chicken poop to just kind of see, just so I can kind of know. I put everything in my chicken journal, so I'm aware of, what dosage I did and what day I did it. I put a reminder in my phone because I've got to do that backup dose in another week. Like everything else, it's about you figuring out what the balance is for you, what your thoughts are on medication. Some people say they do ivermectin twice a year. So, probably I would say like in March, maybe that's where the seasons really seem to change here, February, March. And then you have to do a dose and then another dose a week later. And then they do it again in 6 months. This expires a year from now. So I'm probably going to do that just because, I've got the medication. I spent the $20. I might as well just do it and see. So now for the time being, I feel like we are going to do a little bit more to medicate our chickens preventatively. Again, you can vaccinate birds. You can buy medicated food for them, which I never have done either. I think a lot of it depends on where you are. If the land your chickens are on has been used as farmland, like this has been a residential area for 40 years. I don't think anybody's ever had, chickens in this yard or anything like that. So I wasn't worried about a whole bunch of existing parasites already being there. But some stuff is kind of environmental, right? Like wild birds that come and hang out with your chickens, they're going to have poultry lice and things like that. So it's just something to deal with. So that has been my experience of what I've been learning about worms for the last couple of weeks. Again, I'm still new to this. This is my first experience dealing with any kind of like going and buying medication for my chickens with my freelance money. Like what kind of loser am I? But again, this is Ivermax. I got it at Tractor Supply for $20. It's obviously going to be way more than enough. I may end up trying to sell like half of it to another chicken person in the area. Like, hey, you want to split this? Because this is way too much. But doing it once my birds were really sleepy, they were really groggy. It was pretty straightforward. I was able to do everybody in 5 minutes, and then I'll do it again in another week, and hopefully that'll be the end of this incident. So let me know what other questions you have, what suggestions you have, what's worked for you. But I think if nothing else, the main thing here is just to really do your research from multiple sources. Everything that I taught you today, I read in at least 3 different places. It wasn't just some one random crazy person, and I'm just going by everything that they say. And then, just knowing what works for you and for your flock, depending on your budget and your time and how conservative you want to be. It's the same thing with medicating your children or anything else. Everybody's got an opinion. So let me know what you're thinking. I hope this has been helpful to somebody down the road, and hopefully this was our last experience with worming chickens. But I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama. I appreciate you. I hope this has helped you, and I'll be back soon with more stuff. Thanks.